I'd like to take a moment with this short video to illustrate the role that General Antok Merrick and his Blue Squadron played in the Battle of Scarif, and why I think it's one of the most impressive performances by a single military unit in the entire Star Wars fiction. Upon arriving over Scarif, Blue Squadron was separated from the rest of the fleet to rush through the orbital shield gate before it was closed. General Merrick, 6 of his wingmen and a single U-wing were able to get through before the gate was sealed, and the portion of Blue Squadron left in orbit suffered 3 casualties as they withdrew from the gate. In spite of the fact that they were now the smallest and weakest of the fighter groups left in orbit, the 3 remaining Blue Squadron X-Wings, led by Blue 3, Jaldeen Jarams, immediately began to engage the Imperial Star Destroyer Persecutor at point-blank range, inflicting serious damage on the destroyer's fighter wings and suffering no further casualties, in spite of being heavily outnumbered and completely surrounded. Having reached the surface of Scarif, General Merrick's contingent of Blue Squadron began to provide close air support for Alliance ground units, almost immediately rescuing Rogue One and several Pathfinder commandos from an approaching AT-ACT. The group's U-wing, piloted by Blue 11, Lauren Joma, was able to quickly dispatch a second walker using their door gun, and by the time they had regrouped with the rest of Merrick's pilots, the squadron had eliminated 3 AT-ACTs in a matter of seconds, drastically altering the situation on the ground and freeing dozens of Alliance soldiers from suppressive fire. In orbit, Red Squadron had suffered serious losses engaging the shield gate, while Blue 3 and her 2 wingmen were still intact and still engaging the Persecutor, even managing to destroy one of the capital ship's shield generators whilst continuing to fend off waves of TIE fighters. The opening provided by these 3 exceptionally skilled pilots would later allow the Y-wings of Gold Squadron to disable the Persecutor with ion torpedoes, in what would prove to be the most crucial single attack of the entire battle. Back on the beaches of Scarif, Merrick's contingent had successfully escorted their U-wing to the surface, where they provided desperately needed reinforcements to the Alliance ground force. The Blue Squadron pilots then continued to engage Imperial forces in the air for as long as possible, before finally beginning to suffer casualties when a second wave of TIE strikers were deployed. This Imperial counterattack led to the death of General Merrick and the destruction of Blue 11's U-wing, but despite the loss of their commanding officer and the apparent impossibility of escape, the remaining Blue Squadron pilots continued to fight through the growing swarm of Imperial fighters. Having now suffered over 75% squadron casualties as well as damage to their fighters, Jaldeen Jarams and her wingmen would have been forgiven for withdrawing into hyperspace or attempting to dock for repairs, but they nevertheless continued to assist Red Squadron in protecting the Profundity and her flotilla, keeping the larger vessels safe long enough for the Corvette Lightmaker to perform its ramming maneuver and destroy both Imperial warships. Even as Jyn Erso transmitted the Death Star plans and the battle station targeted the planet, Blue Squadron X-Wings continued to dogfight in the skies of Scarif, fighting to the last pilot until the spreading fireball consumed X-Wing and TIE Fighter alike. It is unclear whether Jaldeen Jarams and the 2 remaining members of Blue Squadron were able to jump to light speed before the Devastator tore the rebel fleet apart, but the casualties suffered by the squadron were already far too great for it to continue service. The bravery, sacrifice and sheer skill displayed by every member of Blue Squadron throughout the Battle of Scarif is nothing short of astounding. Both the fighters in orbit and those beneath the shield were faced with impossible odds from the very start, but still managed to inflict damage far in excess of what should be expected from a single squadron. I have no doubt that without the actions of Antok Merrick, Barrion Rayner, Jaldeen Jarams, Lauren Joma and the rest of Blue Squadron, the Rebel Alliance would never have destroyed the first Death Star.